What I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. Katy Tyndell is an accomplished woman, a law degree, a community advocate, and one of the founding members of a local grassroots organization called Leading Kansas. You'll often see members of Leading Kansas at public events, see them at political rallies, and at marches like the recent No Kings protest, where they contend that citizens need to rise up and defend constitutional freedoms. I love grassroots movements. As you can imagine, I have a lot of questions, and I'm genuinely curious about what motivates this group into action. So I invited Katy to discuss these things and a lot more. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Leading Kansas co-founder, Katy Tyndell. Katy Tyndell, thank you for coming in today. We have worked together in a couple capacities, and I want to tell a story real quick as to why I'm really excited that you're here.
Okay.
We had a town hall, a joint town hall with Mayor Lily Wu, USD 259 board president Diane Albert, and myself. We had a town hall in June, and it was hosted at Wichita City Hall at the council chambers. And I come walking in this room, and there's 100 or so people in there, and I promise you, 50 or so people are sitting there, and they all have on the same T-shirt. And I look, and I'm saying, what is going on here? And this T-shirt said, Leading Kansas. And I thought I'd heard some rumblings about this organization, but there was like 50 people in this room, all had the same T-shirts on, all were engaged in the conversation. I was like, what is this organization? What do they do and what are they about? And that led me to you. So I'm delighted you're here today. I want to have a really good faith conversation and learn more. I really seek to understand, and, who's doing what in the community, what are the organizations that are involved, and I love grassroots movements. So Katy, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we have in common, seeking to understand and listening. So I'm excited to be here today to hear what you have to say too. But I do remember after that town hall, I offered to get you a T-shirt, and you still haven't taken me up on that offer. So,
well, we'll see. We'll see how this conversation goes. We'll see.
Yes, we'll see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I appreciate all grassroots movements, really, but I really do want to understand some things. But before we get to that, what I'm really curious about is you're a very accomplished lawyer. If I remember our conversation correctly, you did your bachelor's at Stanford, and then you did a law degree at Maryland. You're a Turpin.
Cardinal, but yes.
Is that what it is?
No, I'm talking about Stanford. I still cheer
you
first,
identify as
right.
Stanford. And you're practicing law today. You're involved in your kids' schools. And yet here you are, one of the co-founders of this movement and this grassroots movement. What has drawn you to this movement? Why are you involved the way you are?
That's a lot of questions, I think. So first of all, I know you mentioned I'm an accomplished lawyer. I actually do not practice. I keep my licenses current in case I need to go back to law, and I have done that since I graduated from law school in 2009. But some of what has allowed me to get involved with Leading Kansas is the flexibility of my job, and because I am in the family business and help to manage a few affiliated companies on the personal side. But with Leading Kansas, I think to me, it wasn't really a question. There is an urgency, I think, in our country, sort of a need right now for something different. And so I got involved in Leading Kansas. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out where the last 7 months of my life have gone. But Leading Kansas sort of hit the ground running, and I found myself a part of it, and I don't regret any of that. But, I'm curious to know specifically, do you want me to tell you a little bit about how we got started?
How did this thing start? What is it you do? I've gone to your website multiple times, and we've talked multiple times, and I've talked to other people that are involved in the organization. So I think I understand the core tenets, but why did it start? How many people are involved? These are kind of the questions I think to formulate. What is Leading Kansas?
And it's really pretty fluid. We have, so right now, just in terms of responding to your question about how many people are involved, I think right now our email list is up to about 1,700 folks, I think. Our Facebook group is upwards of 2,000, and it's growing every day. But really, we have a core group of, I'd say, probably 100 to 150 volunteers that show up, that do the work, that make it a success. And so to back up to March, because like I said, that's when we got our start, There were a lot of people in the community that were upset about what was unfolding at the national level. And I think there were three things in particular that people had concerns and questions about. One was the dismantling of USAID and what that meant for Kansas farmers and the dismantling of the Food for Peace program. Two was the Department of Government Efficiency. And we had sort of this extra, this extra governmental, it wasn't an agency, extra governmental organization, I don't know what you want to call it, entity, right, that was taking a chainsaw to our federal government, right? And then I think right around the time that Leading Kansas formed, we had just seen sort of the devolution of relations between Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump in the Oval Office. And so, we were kind of at this moment where it was like, is the United States going to stand by our allies on the global scale in this new administration? And so there were folks in Wichita that were concerned about those things. And a lot of us, myself included, had been meeting with our federal representative's office, Senator Moran's office, Senator Marshall's office, Representative Essex's office, meeting with their staffers trying to get answers. And at that point in time, again, there was this constituency of people that couldn't get answers, that felt like nobody was there to answer their calls. And so some of us met back on March 5th. I did not call that meeting. I got invited to that meeting. One of my co-founders, Jess Fries, organized that meeting. And we all met at Groover Labs, and we were like, what are we going to do, right? Our representatives are stonewalling us. We can't get answers. We felt like a lot of what was going on was executive overreach at best. And so we had a conversation about how we were going to hold our elected officials accountable to their constituents. And really at that first meeting, there were so many voices in the room, and one of them was my colleague, Noah Taylor, and he is a veteran, yes, and he's in marketing now, very strategy-oriented individual, and I picked up on a couple of his remarks from that conversation, and as we left the room, there were a group of people that were going to pick the name of this organization. What were we going to be called? There was another group of people that was going to design the logo. So this really was, grassroots from the start, right? And after we left that room, Noah and I had a conversation about whether or not this organization was going to be nonpartisan. And there were some people in the room that felt very strongly that it should not be nonpartisan. So we all left that first meeting and went our separate ways. Well, in the interim, I talked to the folks that had called that original meeting as well as Noah, and we sort of developed a proposal to pitch to the group at the next meeting. Mind you, we have met every week in person since that March meeting. Wow. So when I say this took on a life of its own, it really took on a life of its own. But I think that that's one thing that sets us apart, too, is that in-person community building, those relationships. So the next week we came together again, and this time we had probably doubled in size. I bet there were 75 to 80 people in that room. And Noah and I pitched our proposal to the group, and that proposal stuck. They all went for it. At that point, we had, I think the naming committee picked the name Leading Kansas within like hours of that first meeting. And I'll be honest, at first I didn't like it. I wasn't so sure. Leading Kansas, what is this? And of course it was a play off of Bleeding Kansas, right? Another inflection point in our history. And so, but now it makes perfect sense, because I think what they were thinking is, if our leaders aren't going to lead, we are going to fill that void, right? The people are going to lead Kansas in the right direction. And so that second meeting, again, we pitched this idea. The mission statement was very basic, and that was holding our leaders accountable to the people and not their party or a special interest. And we organized under 4 overarching tenets that we felt a lot of people could get behind, but they're not issue specific, right? So there are these broader tenets that we should all stand up for if we believe in democracy. And those were and those are defending freedoms, protecting our institutions, securing Kansas. So we had that Kansas specific focus, and then championing the truth. And so, from there, we were registering with the state. We were filing our application.
So this is all within 7 months?
Oh, this was all within the first few weeks. Goodness. We had our paperwork filed with the state and the feds within those first few weeks. And thankfully, we have since received our tax-exempt status from the feds. We're a 501c4 civic engagement organization, and that's what we're all about, is getting folks involved.
Well, that's a lot.
It's just a lot.
In a short time.
Yes.
And what's interesting about this, and I want to talk about some of those issues in particular, and I love to, you and I have already had conversations over coffee and talking through issues and worldviews and perspectives, and I appreciate and advocate civil discourse because I really do want to learn and understand. Help me understand this, though.
Yes.
Is Leading Kansas really a nonpartisan group? Is it really? I understand the tenets, and I agree with your tenets of these things are things that the general populace could get around.
Yes.
But is it really? Do you have any Republicans in the group? Is this something that you really believe is a nonpartisan? And I know
absolutely. Yeah. Because I'm nonpartisan at this point. I mean, I think
you've told me that before.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that.
And we can talk about go down that road too. But I think right now, I think in our country, both parties, and this is no offense to you or any,
Sure.
Because I think there are a lot of good civil servants on both sides of the aisle standing up and trying to do what's right. But I think we are in a moment where both parties have become so toxic and the tribalism is so great that when you walk into a room, if you do not check your party at the door, there are immediately all sorts of prejudgments made about where you stand on issues, who you are, what you believe in, whether or not you're going to be on my side of things. Sure. And so when we were conceiving of Leading Kansas in the way that it unfolded, we wanted to stop all that. And I think that's one wonderful thing about our organization is people check their party at the door. So to answer your question, are we really nonpartisan? I honestly do not ask my members what side of the aisle they're on. Now, I have had people offer it up.
Sure.
That
yeah, certainly.
I am a Republican and I cannot stand what's going on right now. Or I'm a Democrat and I want to advocate for X, Y, Z. And sometimes it's, to the point where we have to check people and say, whoa, we're not an issue-specific organization, right? We're here to advocate these overarching tenets and to provide Kansans a platform to have conversations about all these issues, but we're not prepared to take a stance on those issues. And I think, this is funny because my aunt, who I love very dearly, she's my neighbor, she lives 3 doors down, and she keeps me grounded, but she even says that, in this moment, how can an organization stay nonpartisan? And I said to her, and I'll say it to you, it's not that what we're advocating for is partisan. It's that in our current environment, I think there only is one national party that is maybe protecting some of the things that we're talking about or standing up for some of the things. So what we're advocating looks partisan because you have that divide at the national level. But I don't think these are fundamentally partisan things. I mean, I really don't.
Well, let's talk through some of those founding tenets. And I appreciate your perspective and appreciate your opinions. Defending freedom.
Yes.
So obviously, many of this and these positions and these tenets are in response to what we're seeing primarily at the federal level right now, defending freedom.
Yes.
Extrapolate that for me. Help me understand how freedom it needs to be defended in this point in time.
So I think really what we're talking about is individual rights right now. So you see a crackdown on things like freedom of expression. Freedom of speech. I mean, that's a big one right now, right? Due process. So when we talk defending freedoms, we're talking about those freedoms as declared by our Constitution, right? And I don't think that there's much more to it. Like I said, we're not advocating for specific policies on those fronts. It's really just let's uphold the Constitution.
Let me play devil's advocate for a bit and give a perspective on the right.
Let's do it.
Yes, and you're trained in these things, so this should be fun for me. I want to give you a perspective on the right.
Yes.
Yes, freedom needs to be defended. My pushback would be that there's only one party that's standing for freedoms. I'll remind people that tyranny has existed, and it does exist. And that I lived through tyranny too through the previous administration. You remember it was the previous administration that shut down schools, shut down my church, shut down my business, that told many friends of mine that if they didn't get a shot, they could lose their job, and defended employers for terminating people for doing so. That to me felt tyrannical. That felt like government overreach. When I was told that I can't open my church, I was pastoring at that point in time, that my small business with my 85 employees, that we weren't allowed to open. That felt tyrannical. So give me the comp today of how tyranny is existing today, and the freedoms are under attack that need to be defended. And this is me playing devil's advocate, trying to extrapolate these things, like what freedoms are under attack that we have to be protected. It was also, you remember, as we learned past, and this isn't just to throw shade on the Biden administration, but there was a political administration, a presidential administration, that was pressuring Facebook and social media to limit conservative voices and to censor conservative voices. So I think many people on the right, when we hear we need to defend freedom, the questions then come to, well, what freedoms are under attack that need to be defended? And leading Kansas, or Katy would say, these freedoms are what?
I think that's a good question. I think that's a fair question. I think as I see it right now, we are on a very slippery slope. And I will give you an example. So President Trump just issued an executive order on Antifa, right? And he has claimed that, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, whether or not Leading Kansas falls into an Antifa group, I have no idea, right? But it is broad enough to encompass anybody that challenges elements of a capitalist society, right? Now that's scary. That's not freedom of speech, right? So I think freedom of speech is first and foremost in this conversation when you talk about what freedoms need to be defended, right? I also think that we are in a situation now where we have the National Guard in several cities across the country. And what bothers me about this is it is so openly partisan, right? He is continuing to divide us, right? And openly go after quote unquote democratic cities, right? That would be a problem if he was doing it to Republican cities, right? This is in America. We're all Americans first. And again, that's why I think I would pull back on that, the attempt to push the partisan piece of it. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And let me tell you, and I think any honest conservative that lives within the first principles of conservatism needs to make sure that they are holding all administrations accountable. And people know kind of where my head's at on many of these issues. And I do have one of the first principles of conservatism. I'm a movement conservative. I'm an old school conservative. And we believe very strongly in states' rights, very strongly in states' rights. I can say on two sides of the same coin, on one side of the coin, what is happening in some areas across the country and the violence is scary for citizens. And it is a problem. On the other side of the coin is if we allow the federal government to come into individual cities at will, in some regards, uninvited in some regards, that's a precedent that is a scary precedent. And I'm saying that as a conservative.
Sure.
And I'm trying to have a good faith discussion as to, okay, I want to make sure that these principles are guarded and safeguarded. So yes. I understand. We both agree. But what I would like to say is, and what my position has always been is, I don't care who's in the White House. I don't care. I have a disdain for the federal government, and you and I have talked about this. I have a disdain for the federal government on all levels, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Teddy Roosevelt or Abe Lincoln. I'm a movement conservative that has a disdain for the federal government, and I believe that we have been on a downward trajectory in the federal government since the New Deal. And they've grown out of their bandwidth and steered from its core principles so drastically since the New Deal. But that is a worldview that I live and operate under. Yes to defending freedom, but I would just say that I don't think it's one party that's defending freedom more than the other. I think there's a lot to blame across the aisle for the last 60 years. So your thoughts?
That's a lot. So I want to back up a little bit because I don't think I addressed your point about sort of the tyranny of the Biden administration, or as you called it, during COVID. And I do want to talk about that for a second because I think it's important to recognize that we do live in a society, right? And there are certain societal goals that trump individual goals or individual rights at some points in time, and that's undeniable, right? So I think in that situation, public health called for some of those measures. And I'm not going to say it wasn't overboard. It wasn't overreach, right? But I think the experts did what they did at that point in time. And our elected officials, right, were
on every level
on
of
board.
government.
So,
and I will say, to be fair.
And that's representation. That's representative
To
government,
be fair,
right?
is I think now playing armchair quarterback and looking back, we have a different perspective. But the compass that holds all things accountable is the Constitution. Primarily the First Amendment with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and those things were absolutely limited. National crisis or not, they were absolutely limited. Because the same parallel, it's a dangerous parallel for people on the left that would say that, well, to extrapolate that to what's happening today. Because what's happening today is we could make a case that illegal immigration has led to a national crisis. So both sides of the aisle can make those cases in an effort to peel back First Amendment rights.
But I would argue it is very dangerous, and I would argue that if there is an immigration problem, I wouldn't go so far to say illegal immigrants because I don't think any individual human is illegal. But if there's a problem with immigration, you know who should fix it? I'll give you one guess. The legislature, right? That's representative government. Sure. It's not the president. Yeah. And I think that is fundamentally what bothers me the most in the landscape right now is that our elected representatives on the national level and the federal level have completely capitulated their power to the executive. And going back to the Constitution, there's a reason why the legislative branch is in Article 1 and not Article 2, right? Yeah. That was the primary source of our laws.
Well, I will agree with you. I don't think this is a Trump phenomenon. I would tell you that the neutering of the legislative branch and the overreach of executive authorities and proclamations and declarations and all these executive orders is in direct violation. I would agree with you wholeheartedly that this is not the system certainly that the founders originated, but it's certainly not the system that is best for America. I would certainly agree with that, but I would just contend, and here I am defending Donald Trump in this regard, that this isn't just a Trump phenomenon, that this is something that's been a trajectory in recent modern history for our lives in particular.
Yeah. I think the rise of the executive order that's definitely something we've seen over the last 2 decades. And again, I think it's a product of the fact that our representatives are not governing, right? They are passing the buck in so many ways. I'll give you an example. So I was doing some research on this continuing resolution that they're trying, the clean CR. It has been almost 30 years since the legislature, since Congress has passed all 12 appropriations bills by the October 1st deadline in the manner that it was envisioned,
Really?
right? 1997. They've passed omnibus bills, those ginormous bills, right? Or minibus. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Minibus bills, or continuing resolutions. Yeah. But when it comes to the hard work of going through the budgets of each of those 12 appropriations bills or agencies and really parsing out what needs to stay, what needs to go, that's governing, right? Yes. And it's their job. So why are they running if they're not going to do their job?
Well, you and I have a lot of agreement in that regard. And here we are with a $38 trillion debt.
It's
I think we've reached an inflection point that I don't know is recoverable, frankly. I really don't know. Let's talk about we have people on the left and people on the right that have grown so frustrated with the system, with the governing system and the state of affairs in America today, that it has led to disruption and led to the way they vote, the way they act, and their activism. I think leading Kansas is an example of that. And I'm not going to say just on the left, but I think there's a lot of left-leaning, anti-Trump people that have moved into that grassroots organization, and they're frustrated. I would back us up.
Are you saying have moved into grassroots organization in general?
In general, and I would say even leading Kansas, they're frustrated with what's happening. And I think most people get to grassroots activism because they're frustrated. I would walk us backwards a few years as to why people that were not conservatives, they're not pro-life, they're not traditionalists, also supported Donald Trump. And it's something I talk about frequently, the rise of the MAGA movement, who I would say is certainly a right movement, but I don't think it's based purely in conservative principles. And many conservatives like myself have always had a little bit of tension with some of these things. So I have my ideas. Give me your perspective as to what motivates the MAGA movement. This is not we have not talked about these things, you and I, before.
Right.
But what I want to draw the comparison to is that there's a lot of people in this country that are frustrated, particularly young people that are even younger than us, that are very frustrated. It's so hard to get into a home nowadays. Rents and affordable housing are through the roof. Everything seems to be broken for them. Inflation and what it's done to the family unit and the household expenses, everything is just hard. They're on the backside of COVID and what took place with COVID in regards to the shutdown of their schools and their fellowships and their relationships. And it's just so hard for so many people. So many people are frustrated. And I contend, right or wrong, they wanted someone to bust the system and take it to the studs. Is that what many people on the MAGA right see Donald Trump doing? They wanted that. They wanted him to destroy and break a system that wasn't working for America and working for them today. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying I talk to these people, and their frustration has bubbled to the extent that they looked and said, this is the one guy who really doesn't give a damn, and he'll do it. He'll take the man on. He'll take the system on. But it both comes from both sides of a lot of frustration. Do you agree, disagree? What do you think?
I agree. It's frustration. I think it's, frustration, people being angry. I personally think that social media has tons to do with it.
I would agree.
Our country is so divided right now because it's so easy to get online and launch divisive rhetoric, insults at people that you and I would never say to each other's faces, right? Never. And so that's one thing that leading Kansas really does hope to build is those human connections that I think people are so hungry for in this moment. And we can talk more about that later. But so I think that division online is a big part of it. And then I think people, you mentioned that they wanted somebody to come in and break it. And I've heard my friends say that too, right? Yeah, at least he's going to shake it up in there, right? So we kind of saw that movie and how it panned out the first time around. But, setting that aside, I think it seemed good. It seems good until it affects you. And I'll give you an example. One of my best friends, huge Trump supporter, I grew up with her. She also has worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 20 years. So she voted for him once, she voted for him twice. This time around, by about February, she was like, what the hell did I just sign on to, right? Because she had gotten the emails from Doge. It was like, who is Elon Musk to tell me how to do my job? I'm losing all sorts of good people that I worked with that can't stick it out. I don't know what I'm going to do. All of a sudden, I'm having to scrape through contracts for DEI language rather than do my job. I mean, just crazy stuff, right? And then it was like a switch went off, and she was like, well, maybe I thought that wrecking ball was good until it meant that I could no longer work from home and have the flexibility that I had to take care of my family. Now I have to go back into an office. Oh, wait a minute. The Forest Service doesn't even have an office here because I'm in rural Oregon, and now I have to figure out where I'm going to go back into the office and commute to every day. So I say that as an example to say, I think that a lot of people bought what he sold, that he was going to break it, that he was going to drain the swamp. But I think what is scary to me in this moment, whether you're a Trump supporter or not, is the fact that now government really is broken, right? So all these things that he maybe talked about but weren't really true. Yes, we can improve efficiencies. Yes, some of our agencies have gotten bloated. There's room for improvement. Let's take a scalpel instead of a chainsaw. But now they really aren't going to function how they're supposed to. And I mean, it's anybody's guess. I hope that they still do, but there could be cracks in the system that are going to further hurt these people. And then I think we'll really find out whether or not they were okay with burning it all down, right? Yeah. I do think, though, that this provides a wonderful opportunity to build something better. I will say that, because I do think that the bureaucracy was huge. It had gotten too big. And but again, my main problem from a constitutional standpoint is it wasn't his job to fix it. It's our legislators' job to fix it. And do your damn job.
I admire the purest of the branches of government, the approach that you take. And you and I remember the first time you and I had coffee and had this discussion, and I think we were talking about education. and I told you, and you pushed back at me.
Yes, and I still will.
And yes, and it was a lively discussion in good faith, because my approach is I don't want the federal government telling us what to do in Kansas. Education, health, I don't want them involved, because the way we lead our lives here in Kansas is different than what they may be doing in Oregon or Tennessee or New York or Florida. I'm a true believer in states' rights, in this laboratory of experiment that we have here to do the things that we do. I don't want the federal government telling us to do these things. Here's my contention, though, with my own argument. Is if the federal government, and we're paying, effective tax rates of 36% of our income tax to go to the federal government to do all these things that I don't think they should be doing, but unwinding these things at this point is so difficult. If they're not going to do it and push it back to the states, then what I would expect is my 36% income tax rate to do this and my state income tax rate to do this.
Yeah, we talked about
and
that
I would
too.
rather be paying 36% to my state government than 36% to my federal government. But what happens is they're saying, we'll break it and send it back to the states, but they're not changing. Now, the states are saying, well, we've got to take control of these things. We got to fund it, but how do we? So,
Taxation without representation, maybe?
and which is to my frustration with the federal government model as it exists today. And what I contend is it has nothing to do with who's sitting in the White House, and as much as the system itself is so broken that we can't even get ourselves back to what the original intent or design was supposed to be. Now, certainly, in 250 years, things have to pivot and change, but the state's role in our lives and government that's why I'm a localist. I cared so deeply about government on the local level. I just think the federal government is at a level that it was never intended to be, and I think we see diminishing returns and growing frustration that leads to populist movements that upset a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you said a lot there, but I think one thing that I want to pick up on is this idea of states' rights and the federal government's role in everything. I think it's easy to say 250. We've obviously changed in the last 250 years, but we need to sort of get back to what it was meant to be. But you can't do that with some of these federal agencies that were created in the last 100 years to address more recent problems. Take the Department of Education, for example, and I think this is what we talked about before when we met for coffee. Is in my understanding is one of the primary reasons that the Department of Education was built was to enforce civil rights, right? And that whole states' rights thing on the question of civil rights hasn't really worked out so well in the past. And I think one of the scariest things right now with everything involved in this rollback of DEI is that underneath the umbrella term DEI, what has happened effectively in some of these agencies is they've rolled back the civil rights departments that are in federal agencies. And not only that, it is sort of like undoing all the civil rights, not all, but some of the civil rights progress that we have made in the last 60 years. And that's a scary thing, right? So I think I would push back that, that the federal government doesn't have a role to play. Can it be improved upon? Certainly. Had it gotten too big? Absolutely. But again, I go back to we should have taken a scalpel to it and not a chainsaw. Yeah. But I will agree with you that especially in this moment, local government's going to be critical. And Leading Kansas has talked a lot about, building, I mentioned before, it's really about building community at this point and civic engagement and how much more necessary that's going to become as some of the federal resources aren't there.
See it on the local level a lot, and we chat about that. I think it's important, and I appreciate that Leading Kansas is involved at the local level. You're coming to meetings, you guys are advocating, and we're talking on a lot of levels, coming to town halls and such. I do want to ask this question, though, in regards to if the only reason we have a federal bureaucracy is civil rights, which would be enough to hold a federal bureaucracy to maintain civil rights, there's no other way to make sure that civil rights laws are being honored and practiced at all levels of society outside of a bloated bureaucracy that's managed at the federal level. Certainly there's other causes of having a federal bureaucracy other than making sure that civil rights, whether we have the Department of Education or not, there's federal law talking about the administration of civil rights and the assurance of civil rights.
Well, it's being gutted.
And
the Voting Rights Act right now is being gutted. So some of those landmark civil rights laws are no longer, they no longer have the effect that they used to. But I don't think, the federal government has so many so many more roles than just enforcement of civil rights. And I think that's but I think that's an example of one reason why the federal government needs to be there. It's on these bigger picture issues that cannot be effectively handled by the states. The environment's another one. There's a reason why I personally believe the EPA has a role to play in keeping all states honest and making sure we have clean air and clean water, right? Those federal, exactly. Those pieces of federal legislation are integral to everything now. And so
I'm not one to implode the federal government.
Public health is another one.
There is
NIH.
certainly a role to play on the federal level in regards to things like defense, things of. And I do think that there are federal things that they have a role. Immigration is one of these things. The federal government, certainly in the border and border protection and border security, absolutely. I would just contend that I would rather trust the lawmaker that I can go and see at the grocery store than the individual sitting in the White House, where knowingly what's led to all this frustration is every 4 to 8 years you're going to get a pendulum swing this way and a pendulum swing this way and a pendulum. And it's like that. I just don't think that's healthy for this republic.
You just hit on something, though. You're going to have that pendulum swing if our institutions hold, if we have free and fair elections. Right now, we've got there's a big question mark about that.
So let's dive into that.
So,
where's the threat to elections? What are you seeing? And is that part of the protecting institutions piece?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's our foundations, right? Well, one of the biggest pieces, I think I would be a lot more apt to agree with you on let's turn it all over to the states if the states weren't gerrymandered into oblivion, right? If you had
both sides do this.
Both sides do it, but that doesn't make it right? So I personally would be in favor of independent redistricting commissions, independent maps, fair maps, right? Let's get back to actually giving people the power at all with their vote instead of having the outcome be rigged, right? Because in our scheme right now, it is rigged in a lot of ways, both at the state and the federal level. So that's one. But so the gerrymandering piece is huge right now. And so will the elections, will the elections even matter next year? But I think more so than that, will they be free and fair? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. We've got right now an executive branch that has placed military troops in the streets of democratic cities, right? We're 10 months into this administration. So in 3 years, what does that look like in democratic cities? So are people too scared to come out and vote?
Are you thinking, I want to track with you
and with the lack of civil servants or sort of the federal drain, if you will, from the drain of, what am I trying to say, workers out of the federal government, the downsizing of the federal government, will things like the USPS, the mail service, still function properly, right?
If it's functioning well to begin with, but yes.
Right, but we have a lot of these laws on the books now. I think Kansas is one of them, right? They just said, no, it's no longer just postmarked by Election Day. We need that ballot back.
By 7 p.m.
So who gets to determine the mail, right? Like, you see what I'm saying, right? There are problems here.
I do.
Potential problems here.
Potential problems. I think saying that we are questioning free and fair elections, I think the statement in of itself would lead someone to believe is, okay, like we are not having elections, we are doing things. I think what you're getting at and alluding to is that there are things, you're seeing things that could be building up to restriction of voter access and all of these things. And I would just simply say that these things are leveled at the state and the local level. It's Sedgwick County. Like, we run the elections department here in the county. It is a phenomenal operation. Yeah. We've expanded multiple polling sites to give more access to people. Maybe it's just me being an optimist. Yeah. Maybe it's me that I'm not as fearful of what's happening on the federal level. Some would say it's because maybe it just doesn't impact me and my family as much.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that in the previous administration, I was more fearful because things were impacting me and my family. Maybe I would have. I want to play devil's advocate. Yeah. Maybe I would have a difference of opinion. I would just say that this entire system is busted. And it's not working for people, especially people of a younger generation. And they are frustrated. When they are frustrated, they look to leaders that'll say, I'll fix it. I'll break it and I'll build it back up. And many people look to Donald Trump and they said, that's the guy that can do it. He has the courage to do it. And that, I think that's what we've seen, especially young men, particularly, they were so frustrated with these things, and they said, he's the one that doesn't care. He's the one that we can trust to do it. And again, this is more of a populist movement than a conservative movement.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I could have a list of things that I'm frustrated with in regards to all the things that are happening in our country on the federal level. I will never sugarcoat or just white box checklist anything for any president. I will not do that. But I do understand the frustration that comes from both sides right now. Sure. And I do understand that people are looking for change. Yeah. They want change.
This is different. I would push back on that a little bit, though, because I do think that this is different than just politics as usual, if you will. I mean, that pendulum swing that you're talking about, it works until things are completely broken, and it can't work, right? And so that, to me, takes me back to what we talked about in the beginning, the need for leading Kansas and sort of the urgency of now to build a grassroots movement of civically engaged people that not only will have each other's backs in the community, right, but really know what's going on and won't let our leaders continue to get away with not, because I'll tell you what, if what you say is true and the whole point of President Trump was to break it, who's going to pick up the pieces? Well, and that's a question for you. I'm curious to know.
And that is the question. Mm-hmm. I think that's the question at hand. And I actually come from an accord and an opinion that I don't think many of these things at the federal level are really repairable anytime soon. I really don't. I think that we met an inflection point years ago. I think a $38 trillion debt, the things that it takes to right-size the country, I don't think are politically popular. I don't think people have the political courage to do the things that will be necessary. And structurally speaking, we've built something that I don't think can be walked back. If you talk about what are the main sources of a $38 trillion debt, well, I certainly the defense budget and some of these things are driving that, and I have my own opinions on those things and what's happening on a geopolitical worldwide scale. Yeah. But you also think about the entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These are things that people have become very dependent on. Mm-hmm. You can't just strip that away from people. Right. So how do we walk these things to a level to where they're actually solvent for future generations? I don't know if I know the answers. I don't know if anyone knows the answer. I don't know if it's doable with the current system, and I think that's the paradox that we're all working with. Oh, sure it is.
Well, I shouldn't say that.
Well, now you're the optimist now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, I shouldn't say with the current system, because I do think there are inherent problems, which we've already talked about. I mean, one is just the two-party system in general, right? And the fact that there's so much money in campaigns and everybody's running a permanent campaign instead of actually doing the hard work of governing. But when I said that, my knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, sure it is, was that's the fun stuff, right? Like that, to me, people that get into government, and you're a perfect example just from the little I know about you, should want to solve problems.
Yes.
Should want to be engaged with their constituents, listening, right? Yeah. Hearing different viewpoints. And maybe that lawmaker, maybe that leader doesn't have the capacity to come up with the policy solutions, but guess what? They know the people that can put it pen to paper and find those policy solutions. And that's what I hope we can build with leading Kansas is, again, that accountability in government. Sure. Do your job.
So we are on the same page. I would just contend that I think that the model has to be done on the local level. Is that how do we fix these things? Is we're so concerned about what's happening at the federal level. And there are broken systems there. We all know. I think most people can say, you're right, we've got to do something about protecting the border, but our current immigration system is so broken and it's not working for anyone that we've got to have wholesale.
That's intentional. They could fix it.
In some regards, I think you're right. Yeah. I do. But what I would say is we're so concerned about what's happening there. Let's fix the local level. Let's create models on the local level that people can glean from. The local level turns into the state level. And we do things at the state level. And we tell the federal government, we'll handle our own. Yeah. We'll handle our own. This is what we do. And we create models that attract people to the governing systems that are happening at the local level. So I do agree, and I'm really proud of some of the work that we're doing at the local level because I think that we are engaging citizenry. We're listening to ideas. We're trying to pivot. We're trying to reform. because I think government is best at the local level, the closest to us. So,
well, you guys, I was going to give you credit for holding the town hall. I couldn't attend the one last week, but I'm just glad you guys are talking to constituents, because that is huge in this moment. Yes. The only other thing I would say on this local versus federal thing is I think that the federal government is responsible for so many things that go unseen and unheard, right?
I agree.
So that's the scary part to me, is like, okay, well, what happens when all those food inspectors are fired?
Or air traffic controllers.
Air traffic controllers, right? The things, the scientists that are curing cancer, those are the types of things I think that concern me the most when you think about the federal government just disappearing into oblivion.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we should disappear into oblivion. I do think many people supported what was happening on the DOJ level because they realized that we had grown to such an extent that it really wasn't sustainable. And when you heard about some of the, and obviously politics got in the way, and we started hearing about the flagrant situations like, oh my gosh, we're giving condoms to Uganda, or, whatever it was. And people were throwing a fit while we have starving homeless people in our own cities.
Right.
So I do think the effort of saying, we're going to look at any waste, any fraud, any of these things is a worthwhile effort. But like anything that happens on the federal level, it gets politicized. We can't have an honest discussion about, we have a $38 trillion debt. We can't even balance a budget. Where the government is shut down now. Today, I think we're almost 30 days in, and we're recording this at the end of October.
Right.
It's like, this isn't working. These things aren't working.
Right.
So
I think one thing that's so sad to touch on the federal government shutdown right now, you see so much of the bomb throwing and the Republicans will just say, oh, it's all the Democrats' fault. They won't sign on to this clean CR. The Democrats will say it's the Republicans. They want to take away the ACA subsidies, right? But to me, the piece of this that the public needs to know and be aware of is that there is no trust, right? And one of the reasons why there is no trust is because back in March, Congress passed a continuing resolution, right? What happened a few weeks later? Donald Trump did not release the funding for certain things. He rescinded funding. So then he went back to Congress and said, hey, guess what? I just took away the funding. I didn't enact your law that you passed, right? That CR, I'm not following it. Could you just go ahead and pass this Rescissions Act? So then the Republicans in Congress, without the Democrats, passed that Rescissions Act, right? The Rescissions Act of 2025 to claw back some of that funding. So that happened in March and June, I think. Mm-hmm. Why on earth would anybody come to the negotiating table when they know that the potential is there to do that again, right? You'd be foolish if somebody didn't hold up their end of the bargain before, and now they're telling you to walk into the same thing again. I mean, to me, there is no trust at that point, and shame on our lawmakers for thinking we're not smart enough to understand that, right? I think that's one of the key reasons why they can't reach an agreement right now, is because nobody knows if they're gonna really hold the administration's feet to the fire to release the funds that they do agree to.
Interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I do. Yeah. Now, you have been very critical of some of our federal delegation. What is your biggest critique? So we're talking about Senator Moran, Senator Marshall, Congressman Estes here in the 4th District. These are individuals that I know, individuals particularly in Congressman Estes and Senator Moran that I do a lot of work with, and they've been very good to me. Yeah. And they've communicated very clearly with me. But you haven't had the same experience, have you?
No, I have not.
Talk to me. What is your biggest critique? And I'm leading you into this conversation saying that my relationship with them has been very beneficial, and I have seen a lot of work that they've done on the local level here. But you're frustrated that you don't have the access to the town halls and such. Am I reading the room right?
Yeah, I think for me, it's less about access and more about accountability. And what I mean by that is there is such a laundry list of questions that constituents have asked and haven't gotten answers to at this point that it's hard to keep up. I know for me, the focus is really on these bigger picture checks and balances questions. For example, when USAID got dismantled and the Food for Peace program went out the window, I heard from Senator Moran's staffer at the time, he's trying to pass a bill with Tracy Mann to get that moved into USDA. Well, that's great, but my question was, what happens if that bill passes and the executive branch doesn't follow the law? Because guess what? USAID was already spelled out in law as an independent agency. That was already authorized by Congress, and you guys just allowed the executive branch to dismantle it completely. And I haven't gotten an answer on that. So if you could give me an answer on that, please do. But I think, again, I think that's my frustration is the big question, why are you capitulating your power? Why are you putting yourself out of a job? If you don't legislate, right, if you don't pass these, do the nitty-gritty work of governing and just hand that off to the executive branch, we don't have a system of checks and balances.
This has been really helpful for me to understand really kind of the genesis of maybe not just leading Kansas, but Katy Tyndell's ideology and regarding your worldview is that you purely believe that we have a benign legislature that is not doing their constitutional duty and the checks and balances are not operating.
No. Well, and I go one step further. I think it's increasingly hard for the judicial branch to keep up its obligation of checks and balances, because even if it issues decisions, it's the executive branch that has to enforce those decisions. And so unless Congress comes in and does what, stands up for the rule of law, and we have yet to see that. So that's, I think, the crux of why I think we're in such a different political landscape now, and it's not just politics as usual, right? There are some really frightening things happening right now when it comes to rule of law. I mean, my dad used to always say, if you don't have the rule of law, you don't have anything. And right now, again, I would go back to this USAID or DOGE, pick a number of the actions that they took, right, to dismantle the federal government. Those were authorized by Congress, but yet Congress just let the executive branch unilaterally dismantle them.
No, I understand the genesis of your argument. I appreciate the genesis of your argument. Interestingly enough, and I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a little backstory to some of these things. My father-in-law is a cattle rancher. Mm-hmm. He's one of the more successful cattle ranchers here in the state of Kansas. Mm-hmm. Cattle ranchers, by and large, are typically more conservative individuals. My father-in-law is a very avid Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. Here in the last week, and again, we're recording this at the end of October. In the last week,
Argentina beef, bring it on.
The president made some comments that have really offended some ranchers here in Kansas in particular. Me knowing a little bit about the cattle business, being involved in the cattle business, the things that the president are saying are not accurate. We have, and my father-in-law, an avid Trump supporter, voted for him 3 times.
Yeah.
Has, for the last 12 years during this drought, has painstakingly continued the operations to feed America, has cut staff, has extended the life of equipment far past when they should have, and he's gone into debt to make sure that he could produce beef for America. Now that the cattle market has changed, the drought has ended for the most part, and now the cattle market is good for these ranchers. What he's not doing is sticking a bunch of money in his pocket. You know what he's doing? He's hiring back staff at the ranch. Yeah. He is buying new equipment and benefiting the economy. He is paying down debt is what he's doing, and he's investing back into our family operation. And to know that, and when the president made comments that the only reason that the industry is going well now is tariffs and we need to infiltrate Argentina beef and import this into the country, it deeply offended my father-in-law and many of his friends. Are they still Trump supporters? I'm certain that they probably are.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when we lack conservative principles about free markets and we work into populist movements.
Yes.
This is a result of some of those things. And again, I think I understand kind of what President Trump was trying to allude to, and he cares very deeply about, the price of beef and some of these things for the consumers. But, American first policies were good enough for the auto industry.
Right.
American first policies were good enough for other trades and other manufacturing in the steel industry, but apparently American first policies aren't good for our good old-fashioned ranchers, and that's frustrated a lot of people.
Yeah.
Conservatives, like myself, need to be honest and hold everyone accountable that violate principles of conservatism. So I'll never be someone that checks the box just for a Trump supporter or a Republican supporter. I'm a Christian first and a conservative second. And I'll just an example of how ranchers today in Kansas are very frustrated at some of these things.
Yeah.
I got 2 questions.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from you today in regards to leading Kansas and really what moves you and motivates you. What's the future of leading Kansas? You have 1,700 people in this email list. Everywhere I go, I see people in leading Kansas shirts now. You're showing up at political rallies and marches and things. Like, what's the movement of this thing? Where are we heading?
I do not have a crystal ball, Ryan. That's a good question. I mean, if you would have told me 7 months ago where we'd be now, and I mean, we made a list the other day of everything that we've done in the last 7 months. And, you know, I know the news covers the Hands Off rally or the No Kings March, but, you know, we've done town halls, we've held constitutional law forums, we've held a vigil on Constitution Day to read the Constitution, make sure everybody remembered that. Coffee and Conversations, we're about to start up our Coffee and Conversations right here in CD4. So I think we just want to keep building a community of civically engaged people. And for me personally, that includes cross-partisan dialogue. Because you know what? I can't learn anything in my own echo chamber, right? And yeah, and the only way, I firmly believe that the best decisions are made with differing opinions in the room. I mean, I think of Abraham Lincoln and his team of rivals. Sure. I mean, he surrounded himself with people that disagreed with him, right? Because that's how you come to the best decision. And so
you see my Lincoln bobblehead doll.
Oh, yes, that is exactly what I was talking about.
Councilmember Mike Holheisel gave me the bobblehead doll.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, team of rivals. But I think, so for the future of Leading Kansas, we want to continue to grow the movement. We have members across the state. We just held an event last Thursday, our first meeting in Lawrence at the Lawrence Arts Center. Some wonderful people in the room, some folks on the ground there that want to get busy there doing grassroots work too. So I look forward to continuing to grow it, but I have no idea where this is going to go.
Can we get some conservatives in the movement?
Oh, there absolutely are. I think there are true conservatives like you're talking about, right? Rule of law, free trade conservatives, but that maybe don't support this populist movement that has overtaken the Conservative Party.
Really curious. And I love engaging these types of conversations and learning and listening. I've said this a number of times. We need more communication, not less.
Absolutely.
You and I do believe you when you say that you're a nonpartisan person. You are. I believe that based on conversations we've had. And I appreciate that work you're doing in the community in many regards. I'm really curious, though, how this movement continues to go. I think the tug will be for you to maintain, and the tension will be to maintain nonpartisanship. Yeah. I think it's going to be really hard for you and people in your movement not to want to endorse candidates. And when we look at endorsements, maybe there's only Democrats that are being endorsed. I think I would encourage you to really try to keep this a nonpartisan movement and to talk about the rule of law and some of these things. My last question.
Well, just to respond to that, I mean, as long as I'm, part of the crew at the helm of this ship, it will be, because I feel very strongly that we have to learn to talk to each other again.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
What's your political future?
Yes. As I spit out my coffee.
No, seriously. Katy, listen. Okay. You're a Stanford grad. You're a law grad. You work in family business. You understand small business. You have a really interesting past, I believe, in, if you told me, Indian affairs. And okay, so now you're really involved in grassroots movements. You obviously have a political flair about you. Is there something you have an interest in politics in the future?
I think I will always have an interest in politics just because I'm passionate about this stuff. I got bit by the bug when I was in Washington, D.C. straight out of college. But to answer your question right now, my work with Leading Kansas is taken precedence over everything. I've also been told that you can't not be, I wouldn't know where to go, right, if I were to run for office, because I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, and I've been told that independents have no place except for to ruin elections. And so I don't really have a home. So my home is with Leading Kansas, and that's where I'm going to stay for right now.
Well, you're very accomplished. You have a beautiful young family, too.
Well, thank you.
And you're doing a lot of work, and I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the civility, and we'll stay in touch, because I really am curious about where this movement is going and how we can continue to grow conversations and civility in this community. And best of luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.